All right, hello. All right, hello again. So in this video, I'm going to go over some of the tools and software that you're going to need for this class. There's not a lot of it, but I want to sort of give you a brief introduction so you understand like what you need to install and how you need to use stuff. But yeah, so again, we're basically going to go over installing and using sort of the required software and stuff you need. There's two pieces of software you're going to need for web development, which is you're going to need a web browser, and then you're going to need an editor, something to write the code that the browser will display. And the one we're going to recommend you use for that is this program called Visual Studio Code. All right, so the first thing you're going to need to do any kind of web development is you're going to need a web browser, which all of you should have on your computer. And in fact, if you're watching this video, you're probably watching it on a web browser. There's lots of web browsers that exist in the world. For this class, I recommend that you install and use Chrome or one of its variations, Chromium, etc., because of the development tools and because of the support that it provides for actually doing web development. Firefox and Edge can also work. They also provide these types of tools. But if we all worked with Chrome, then at least it keeps things a little bit standardized and it helps a bit for why things might look the way that they do. I'm going to put a note that I don't like Safari as a web browser. Safari does a lot of work to hide the URL up here, the thing that we actually need to be able to understand what page we're viewing. Safari has some other behaviors that are not great for web stuff in general. So I'm not a big fan of it as a browser, like from a user perspective, and also as a developer perspective, I find that as a browser, it tends to hide a bunch of things that we actually need. So I would recommend not using Safari. I would recommend using Chrome, and if you want to use Firefox or Edge, that's fine as well. Other browsers can also work, but again, the more we stick with sort of a standard, the easier it'll be for us to communicate about what might be going on or how browsers work. We'll go over this in more detail, but the thing that you'll want to use from Chrome, sort of the thing that you're going to get, is you're going to get a set of what are called the developer tools. So Chrome includes a bunch of features that lets you be able to sort of understand what a web page is displaying and why it might be displaying that. So if we go to an actual web page, like to our iSchool web page, for example, yay, stories about MSIM. We can go ahead and if you go under the View menu in the menu bar, and you go under Developer, there is a set of tools called the developer tools, and you can click on that in order to open them up. And they'll open up for you if you haven't done this before. They generally open up in a sidebar over here. And then it'll actually, I think by default, show you this. Yeah, sorry, I've been working this before. But it'll basically show you a bunch of stuff about what the code is that's been used to generate the particular web pages that you're looking at. And so we can then use it to say, well, if I look at this page and I look at this code, how do these two things match? So this is going to be sort of a really useful set of tools for use for actually working with and understanding and debugging and sort of fixing web pages as we're doing stuff. We'll go over in more detail sort of how we use these once we start actually talking about the code. But again, I want to sort of at least to flag that this is the set of functionality that we really want our browser to support. And the way that we can get to it again is you go through View and Developer and then to our developer tools. But yeah, we'll review this more as we get to talking about more other kinds of tools. The second piece of software you're going to need is an editor. It's a place for us to write this code. We don't want to write it using something like Word or even something like Notepad because Word's going to try to offer a bunch of formatting and like turns into paragraphs. We're not writing paragraphs. We're going to be writing code. So the tool we're going to use instead, and the one that we recommend, is a piece of software called Visual Studio Code. This is a coding editor. It's developed by Microsoft. It is free, high-quality software from Microsoft, which is often kind of a weird thing to say because Microsoft doesn't usually produce stuff that's either free or good high quality. Sorry, I didn't actually pull up the page directly. You can get Visual Studio Code from their website, code.visualstudio.com. Visual Studio Code is distinct from the larger Visual Studio program. If you find something called just Visual Studio, that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for Visual Studio Code, or VS Code or VSC, sometimes how it's enabled. But you can get it from the website. You can download it. It is a simple application. It downloads like any other Mac or Windows-based application you work with. It works across any operating system, and that works fine. You can then open it up. It has a little icon that again looks like this. And once you open it up, it's a little bit like opening Word, right? Again, this is just an editor. It's a place that we're going to be able to write code. So it's similar to if you opened up Word or if you opened up Notepad or TextEdit or any of the other sort of editors you've used, but this one is specialized for doing web development style code and has some sort of nice features and structuring, and sort of it makes it easier to understand and read and work with that kind of information. So again, it's just it'll open up, and normally it'll open up sort of as when you first open up, it'll open up as kind of an empty file. It might have like a welcome screen. You can close that to make that come together. What we're often going to be doing with Visual Studio is we're going to be opening up entire folders of representing web pages, right? Pages are going to be built up a whole bunch of different files that all are going to sit inside of a single folder. And we'll go into more detail again how this works later, but we'll give some example. So for example, so I have a example for LIS 540 that's got a couple of files we would use, right? There's one called here index.html, one style.css, and we'll again talk about what these things mean more in the future. But this thing here, right, this whole folder, this whole LIS 549 folder, that would be my website that I'm working on right now. There's nothing in it yet because it's just a starting example, file example, but that would be what my page would look like. So what you could do in Visual Studio is if you go to the file menu, just like you go to the file menu in Word, we can open something. And often instead of opening a file, we really want to think about opening a folder. You really want to open up the entire folder all at once. So I recommend that you click Open Folder, and then you can choose what folder you want to open. And again, you'll need to go find whatever web files you're working on. Mine are saved on my desktop. So I can go open up my Info 549 example folder. That's the folder I want to open. So when I click Open on that, what it does is it then gives me a sidebar here that lists out all the different files in that folder. And I can click on them, I can double click on them in order to open them up inside like this tabbed area here where I can then see all the different files I want to see. So here's this one called index.html. And then you see you can tell this is a folder because it's got the little arrow here, right? So this is a folder. I can click the arrow to expand it out to see what's inside of it. And then I can click on the file inside of that in order to double click on that in order to open it up as well. So now I can have my two files that are open up in different tabs, same way you might have tabs in your browser. And then I can write different content, right? This can be hello LIS 549, right? I can type some content here. This is going to be some CSS. So this is going to be, here's some CSS content, right? I can just type some code here to make this happen. And again, we'll talk about what this stuff looks like and what goes in these files more in a future video. I'm trying to show you the interface for the software at the moment. And again, we can just click on tabs to be able to work between the two different files we want to use. If you want to create new files or new folders, if you sort of just move your mouse over this area, there's a new file button, there's a new folder button. So you can be able to use this to effectively navigate to, so you don't need to open up Finder or File Explorer. You can do almost all the stuff through Visual Studio itself. So one other thing I want to make sure to note is that if you start writing out some text, right, this is VS Code, it is nice. If you see this, do you see this solid circle? I can't really point it with the mouse, but there's a sort of filled in solid circle at the top. That means the file has not yet been saved, right? I've written some code here. I've written some text, or I've made some modifications to my file, but I haven't saved it to my hard drive. I haven't saved it to my computer yet. Anytime you want to write some stuff, in order for it to see in the browser, you'll have to have saved that file first in order for the browser to be able to know what it's looking at. So you always want to make sure that you've saved your file, right? File, save, or the Control-S shortcut, the sort of the same things, again, the same way you'd save a file inside of Word. And once you save, you'll notice that circle goes away and gets replaced by the X to close the tab itself. So if something doesn't seem to be working, right, if you're writing out some code or doing some changes and nothing seems to be, like, your browser doesn't seem to reflect that, like nothing seems like it's working, make sure that you've saved the file. It's really common for students to forget to save something because it's like another button you have to remember. And then you end up getting that circle. You can kind of see over here in my style.css thing. I've forgotten to save that as well. So again, that's sort of the main trick to make sure to remember. So the things to know about Visual Studio, again, it's like Word. It's just an editor. It's going to be where we're going to type out a bunch of code, and we'll can do more examples of that as we go. Remember that you can do File, Open Folder in order to open up an entire folder. And that's usually the best way of doing things. And you can get tabs with each different file. And then make sure to remember that when you save your file, that you can see the X to know that you've actually saved the file and it's not an unsaved set of code that you're working with. Yeah, those are the tools that we're going to use. And that's going to be it, right? We're going to use the browser. We're going to use VS Code. And we're going to write our work. We're going to basically do our writing inside of VS Code instead of writing in Word. And then we're going to view what we've written. We're going to open that inside of the browser to see how that works. And we'll go over more details about how we do that in our next video. Okay, thank you.